Yo, what's up guys? It's Noah here, and in today's video, going to be talking about the Week 7 Thursday Night Football Showdown slate on Draftkings. We got a pretty decent game this Thursday night between the Saints and the Cardinals. It's a really tricky slate because right now there's a ton of unknowns. As you can see on the DK player pool, like there's so many question marks right now regarding this slate. I'm recording this video on Tuesday, and that's normally when I always make these videos for the Thursday Night Showdown slate. We'll have more of an update probably sometime on Wednesday with, designations for these guys and, who's going to be in, who's going to be out. I'll try and do my best to kind of give my thoughts on, each one of these plays and each one of these players, which guys I think will play, which guys I think won't play. But we're going to do like we always do, guys. We're going to go kind of from top to bottom, talk about all the playable options on this Showdown slate. Just before we do get started, make sure you guys do hit that like button down below if you do enjoy these Showdown videos and if they do help you out. Hit that subscribe button if you have not yet. And also, make sure to check out the sponsor of the video, PrizePicks. So, PrizePicks, sure most of you guys have heard of them, but if you have not, they're a player prop-based DFS site where it's very simple and easy to use. You're just picking the over or the under. You're taking more or less on a player's projection. They do have some props posted for Thursday night, but not a ton. I'm sure, once we get some updates on some of these injuries, we will see more props added to the board. But right now, there's not a ton of props up for Thursday night. But you can take a look at their board for Sunday. They do already have some props posted for the Sunday slate. You want to see all the props they're offering for Sunday. NBA season's just starting up, so if you want to take a look at some of the NBA props they're offering as well, you can do that too. I will be sharing probably one or two plays that I like for this Thursday night football game. I will have a separate video going out on the channel, a PrizePicks video. Probably will be posted sometime on Wednesday. So make sure you check that out if you are playing on PrizePicks. But if you're not playing on PrizePicks yet, sign up and use promo code Noah. When you guys do sign up with my promo code, you will get your first deposit matched up to $100. But let's talk through the Showdown slate, guys, for Thursday night. We'll start off at the top where we got Kyler Murray coming in as the most expensive option. He's $11,200. I think Kyler Murray is probably the number one overall play on this Showdown slate, especially when you're factoring in floor. And I think for ceiling, he definitely has the ceiling to be the highest scoring player overall. But the floor is definitely there for Kyler, and we've seen that so far this season. He has at least 16 DraftKings points in all 6 of their games this season. We've yet to see like that big, 35, 36-point game from Kyler. We know he has that kind of upside in him. He does offer some rushing upside. We saw him run for 100 yards last week against the Seahawks, which is obviously great to see. They're just, there isn't a player on the slate, at least like quarterback-wise, that, is going to offer the same floor and ceiling that Kyler does. We'll talk about the Saints quarterbacks in a second, but I think Kyler is definitely a staple for me. I could even see playing him at captain. I think Kyler is one of those guys that, could make the pool for captain. In order for a quarterback to be a winning captain, they're probably going to have to throw multiple touchdowns to different receivers, which obviously Kyler could do. Or he potentially could run in a touchdown or run in multiple touchdowns. He always could do that as well. In order for a quarterback to be a winning captain, if they lock in on one receiver, like let's say Kyler has, let's say he throws for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. If 2 of those touchdowns go to DeAndre Hopkins, well, at that point, DeAndre Hopkins probably going to be the better captain play. But if you think Kyler's going to have a big game and he's going to kind of spread out all the production, then yeah, I think playing Kyler at captain is definitely viable on the slate. And then you have Alvin Kamara at $10,600. I mean, Kamara just continues to get a great workload. Last 2 games, he's been involved a ton. 29 touches against Seattle, 25 touches against Cincinnati. He seems to be back to full strength, fully healthy, getting great usage both on the ground and through the air. Last 2 games with Andy Dalton at quarterback, we've seen Kamara get targeted 15 times. So I think if Andy Dalton winds up starting again on Thursday, which it kind of seems like it's going to be the case, with Andy Dalton at quarterback, that definitely is good for Kamara because Dalton is a lot more likely to dump it off to the running back, whereas Jameis Winston, on the other hand, does not really target the running backs a ton. And we know Kamara is going to be efficient on the ground. He's just a really talented running back. He's going to get a monster workload. He's basically the engine for the Saints offense, and I think he's one of the better plays as well in the Showdown slate. I like him quite a bit too. There's really nothing negative you can say about any of these top guys. You got DeAndre Hopkins coming in at $10,200. He might be like the biggest question mark for this game. Like he might be I think of all the studs, between Murray, Kamara, and Hopkins, I think Hopkins will be the lowest owned just because we don't really know what we're going to get from DeAndre Hopkins. This is his first game back from suspension. But you would think he's just going to come right in and have a big role, especially with Marquise Brown out. If Marquise Brown was playing, I wouldn't feel as good about Hopkins, but I think with Marquise Brown out, they're just going to lean on Hopkins a ton. Kyler is going to be targeting DeAndre Hopkins a ton. he should, demand that monster target share that he's always had. He should be out there for almost every single snap. I think he's a really, really good GPP play, especially if his ownership is going to be lower than Kyler, lower than Kamara. Then yeah, definitely give me DeAndre Hopkins in tournaments here. This Saints secondary is one that you can beat. They've been giving up plenty of fantasy points to wide receivers this season, giving up the 7th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. They're still going to be without Marshawn Lattimore, which I think is obviously a big boost for Hopkins. If Lattimore was playing here, he would probably be shadowing Hopkins, but since he's out, it becomes a much better matchup for DeAndre Hopkins. So I think all these top guys look really good. I definitely think DeAndre Hopkins, if he's going to be the lowest owned of all the studs, he's probably my favorite pay-up option, and I do like playing him at the captain spot as well. If Kyler Murray, if he has a big passing game and he's locking in on DeAndre Hopkins, we could definitely see Hopkins be the optimal captain on the slate. But talking about some of these other options in the mid-range, so right now with the Saints quarterbacks, both Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton are kind of banged up. I think Andy Dalton's going to be fine. This injury that he has, it doesn't seem to be too crazy. I mean, he played last week and he seemed to be fine. But Jameis Winston, on the other hand, has missed their last 2 games, hasn't played since week 3, so we'll have to keep an eye on this. I don't think Winston's going to play here, especially on a short week. So most likely you're going to see Andy Dalton start at quarterback once again for the Saints. At 9,400, I'm not in love with Dalton on this slate. Andy Dalton is not a guy that really has a ton of upside. In order for him to have a big game, he's just going to have to run like really good on touchdowns. He's going to have to probably throw multiple touchdowns to put up a big ceiling because he doesn't really offer any rushing upside. He's not going to throw the ball a ton. We know the Saints team, they really want to run the ball with Alvin Kamara and just give Kamara a massive workload. I normally am, into playing both quarterbacks, but on this slate, I wouldn't force both quarterbacks in my lineup. Obviously, I think Kyler is a really good play, but I don't think you have to go to Andy Dalton here. Dalton's not going to be someone that I really prioritize. He's obviously playable, but I'm not going to be, forcing him in. And then in this mid-range, we got some other question marks. So James Conner, he was out last week. We saw Eno Benjamin have a big workload. Don't really have any update yet on James Conner. He, was a non-participant in their Monday's estimated practice, or estimated injury report. So I don't really know here with Conner. I think if Conner plays, there's a good chance that him and Eno Benjamin are going to split carries, especially because Eno Benjamin looked so good last week and he handled a massive workload. If Conner is out again, then I think you're going to see Eno Benjamin once again have a really big workload. Eno Benjamin also did not practice Monday, but I think he's fine. His injury doesn't seem to be like too worrisome. Last week, 18 touches for Eno Benjamin, played on over I think he played 87% of the snaps. Yeah, 87% of the snaps for Benjamin. He's going to have a big workload. I mean, James Conner was out last week. We'll see if he plays. But Darrell Williams, I don't think he's going to play. Jonathan Ward is still on IR. Like, they don't really have any other running backs they feel comfortable giving touches to. So this will be something to monitor. I will say that if Eno Benjamin and James Conner both play, I'm probably just going to avoid the Arizona backfield because I think at that point it could be like a 50-50 timeshare. But if Conner's out, I think Benjamin's a pretty good option at 8,200. If Conner, if Benjamin's out and Conner plays, like I would be very surprised if that happens. But by some chance, if Benjamin's out and then Conner plays, like we could go to Conner. But we'll have to wait and see there with the Arizona running backs. For now, just going to avoid that backfield just because I think Conner's going to be splitting time with Benjamin. But obviously that could change if Conner doesn't want to play in. Then you have Michael Thomas at 8,600. I don't really know if Michael Thomas is going to play here. He hasn't played, very similar to Jameis Winston. He hasn't played since week 3 either. Dealing with a foot injury. It's a short week. He did not practice on Tuesday, so doesn't seem good for Michael Thomas to play this week. I'm just going to kind of assume that he's out. If he does play, I mean, he's for sure viable, but I wouldn't feel great about him just dealing with an injury and it being a short week. They could maybe limit him a little bit. I think most likely scenario, though, is that Michael Thomas once again will be out this week. But then we get to Chris Olave. So Chris Olave has already said that he's going to play for this game. And at 7,400, I think Chris Olave looks like a really strong play here in the mid-range, especially if we assume that Michael Thomas doesn't play, and if we assume that maybe Jarvis Landry doesn't play either. Jarvis Landry was out last week as well. That could mean big opportunity for Chris Olave. He's had a pretty good target share this season. He's been involved a good amount. He's a guy that always offers big play upside. I know he's towards the top of the league. Maybe not anymore since he didn't play last week, but I know he was towards the top of the league in terms of air yards. He's a guy that just runs a lot of deep vertical routes, and he doesn't. It only takes one long catch for Olave to really get there. But if he's going to continue to see the volume as well, then that just makes Olave a really strong play here. At 7,400, I like him a lot in the mid range. I definitely think he's underpriced for the role and the volume that he should get here. He's going to be the number one receiver for the Saints, if Michael Thomas doesn't play, which again doesn't seem like he's going to. Taysom Hill is 7,200. I'm probably just going to be avoiding. I don't think Taysom Hill is really a guy that I'll be going to on this slate. You're going to have he's going to have to get into the end zone to get there to justify rostering at this price tag, and he just hasn't been involved enough to really warrant paying 7,200 for. Last week, Taysom Hill, he played on 30 or 21% of the snaps, so he only played on 15 snaps last week. He threw 4 passes, two completions for 16 yards. He did also have 5 carries for 39 yards. It does seem every time he's on the field, it seems like he's going to get the ball, but if he's only going to play like 30% of snaps, you're just hoping that he has a week like week 5 where he just runs in a bunch of touchdowns. Anytime they get near the goal line or in the red zone, there's always a chance that Taysom Hill goes out there and gets a rushing touchdown. But I'm not going to play him at 7,200. I think he's definitely overpriced. Zach Ertz at 7K, I think is another solid option though in the mid-range. He just continues to see really, really good volume. I mean, he's had double-digit targets in 4 out of 6 games this season. They are going to be without Marquise Brown, but they are getting back DeAndre Hopkins. So does Ertz continue to see this massive target share even with Hopkins back? I think it's possible, especially since Marquise Brown isn't available now. If we get to a point where Hopkins is healthy, Brown's healthy, Rondale Moore's healthy, then we might see Zach Ertz take a little bit of a hit in terms of his target share. But right now, I think Zach Ertz is going to consistently get 7-8 targets a game. 7K, he's still in play for me at this price tag. We've seen just the volume be there, and at this price, I'm willing to pay 7K for him when he continues to see this massive amount of volume. Now, I think a guy like Chris Olave does carry a lot more upside. I think Chris Olave is a lot more likely to get over 100 yards, whereas Ertz, you probably are going to need a touchdown for Ertz to get there. But again, if he continues to see those type of targets, he's going to be in play. And then you have Tre'Quan Smith, who probably will operate as the wide receiver 2 for the Saints this week, with Olave back. Tre'Quan Smith, I mean, at 6,200, I'm not really interested in him. Last week he only saw 3 targets. I do want to say that he played on a lot of snaps. I mean, he did play on 71% of the snaps last week, but he's going to be competing for targets with Chris Olave this week, and they still have Alvin Kamara they're going to give a lot of opportunity to in the passing game. I'm not really in love with Tre'Quan Smith at 6,200. I think he's priced right, if not a little bit overpriced for what his role is right now. So let's talk about some value on the slate, and we definitely have some value. Rondale Moore at 5,800 I think is probably the best value play on this slate. I assume he will be popular, but kind of for good reason. He might take a little bit of a hit with DeAndre Hopkins now playing, but I still think Rondale Moore is going to be kind of an every down wide receiver, and he's going to see a good amount of volume. I mean, he's seen 23 targets in the 3 games he's played in this season, and I do believe he played on every single snap last week. He played 99% of the snaps for Rondale Moore, so he's going to be out there for almost every single snap. He normally plays in the slot, and he should continue to play in the slot because DeAndre Hopkins will mainly play on the outside. AJ Green will play on the outside, and they'll probably involve Robbie Anderson as well, who they did just trade for. We'll talk about Robbie Anderson in a second. But Rondale Moore should play probably every snap in the slot, should get, once again, continuing to see a lot of targets. And Rondale Moore at 5,800 I think is definitely too cheap for the volume that he's getting right now. He hasn't found the end zone yet, but I think at some point he's going to have a game where he gets into the end zone, puts up 15, 16 Draftkings points, and if he does that at 5,800, probably going to wind up being a pretty good value play. So do feel really good about Rondale Moore. I think he's a really good value. Robbie Anderson, on the other hand, we don't really know what he's going to do here in his first game with the Cardinals. So obviously, he played for Carolina on Sunday. Things went south, and he got kicked out of the game, and then he got traded to Arizona. I'm assuming he will be active for Arizona this week. Obviously, he's only had 2 or 3 days to get familiar with the playbook. So is Robbie Anderson going to have a big role right out of the gate? Probably not. But Robbie Anderson is one of these guys that does always offer big play upside. He's always a deep threat. He's always a chance. He always has a chance to catch a long touchdown, and he's getting a big time quarterback upgrade going from Baker Mayfield to Kyler Murray. So I think Robbie Anderson's going to be a better fantasy wide receiver moving forward. Is he going to have a big game in his first game with Arizona? I would say probably not. But if you want to take a shot on Robbie Anderson, I don't hate it. I feel a lot better about Rondale Moore though. But Robbie Anderson is at least playable, assuming that he is indeed active for Arizona this week. But Mark Ingram at 5,200, not really going to go there. He's just going to get 7 or 8 touches as the backup to Kamara. priced appropriately, if not overpriced. Jarvis Landry, I don't think he's going to play this week. He didn't practice on Tuesday. He's been out since week 4. I'm just going to assume that Landry remains out, which should mean Marquez Callaway will probably operate as the wide receiver 3 for the Saints. Now, Marquez Callaway last week did get 7 targets, but he didn't really do much with those targets, just 3 catches for 36 yards. I think, his target share is probably going to take a hit this week now that Chris Olave's back. So not that interested in Marquez Callaway. I will say that if I was going to take a shot on on a different Saints receiver besides Olave, I think Callaway would be my preferred option. Like between paying $6,200 for Traquan Smith or paying $4,800 for Callaway, I think I'd rather just go to Callaway for cheaper because I think both guys project very similarly. But Callaway at $4,800, he's at least playable. I don't feel great about him, but he's going to be out there for a good amount of snaps. Last week he did play over 70% of the snaps. Actually led the Saints wide receivers in snaps played. So he's viable, but I wish he was a little bit cheaper. And then you got like the defenses, who I'm not in love with on either side. Don't really think the defenses stand out on this slate. The kickers I am fine with. I think this is definitely a slate where you can go to one of the 2 kickers. Talking about some punt options though, Greg Dortch, he had a really good start to the season, but his role just has diminished, and he's not really involved anymore. So can't really go to Greg Dortch right now. Juwan Johnson, I do want to mention just because this is a pretty good matchup against the Cardinals. The Cardinals so far this season have been really getting beat up by tight ends. They're giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends, the most targets, most receptions, and the most receiving yards. Arizona's been a great matchup for tight ends this season, so I think the matchup's really good for Juwan Johnson. He's not going to really see many targets, but if he can get open in the red zone and potentially get a touchdown, at $3K, he definitely will probably be worth rostering if he finds the end zone at this salary. We will need to keep an eye on the status of Adam Trautman because that does impact the opportunity for Juwan Johnson. I would definitely feel better about Johnson if Trautman doesn't play. And it looks like Trautman did not practice on Tuesday, so Trautman probably more leaning towards being out as well. If he's out, I think Juwan Johnson as a punt option does make some sense at $3K. AJ Green, I think, is probably going to take a little bit of a hit now that Robbie Anderson is in the mix. I think AJ Green will still be out there for a good amount of snaps, but he's another guy that just hasn't really been able to get many targets this year. Even though he did play on like over 70% of the snaps last week, he still only had 4 targets. Played 69% of the snaps. He's only $2,600, so like he's cheap enough that if he does see like 4 or 5 targets, that's going to make him viable at the salary. But I don't feel great about AJ Green right now. He just hasn't done anything this season. I think he's just, at this point, I think he's just dust. But he is very cheap, so I at least wanted to mention him. And that's probably it. Like, I don't really see anyone else down here that's worth rostering. I know this Shaheed guy for the Saints, he did get a touchdown last week, but it was a 44-yard carry. He only saw 1 target and 1 carry. I would not chase that, even at 2K. That's probably it, man. Like, this is not the best showdown slate. Like, there's a lot of injuries, I will say. It's a solid showdown slate, but we're going to have to pay attention to the injury report here. Again, guys, especially with NBA going on right now, it's a little tough to get out all this content for all these different sports. I do want to try and upload these showdown videos still, even though we do have NBA going on right now. I want to cover the Thursday night showdown slates, the Monday night showdown slates, and I normally do make these videos on Tuesday. I think I'm going to try and stick to that schedule. But we'll have to keep an eye on the injury report Wednesday, see who's actually in or out. For right now, I think most likely scenario is that Jameis Winston will be out again and Andy Dalton will start. I think it's most likely scenario that both Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry will be out once again. The Arizona backfield I'm not as confident in, but I think most likely you probably will see Connor out again, and then Eno Benjamin will have a really big role. We kind of talked about how that will play out anyway, my thoughts on the Arizona backfield depending on who's in or out. But I hope you guys did enjoy this showdown video. I hope it did help. As always, I appreciate you guys watching these videos, supporting the channel. Hit that like button if you did enjoy. Hit that subscribe button if you guys have not yet. And make sure to sign up for PrizePicks as well. Use promo code NOAH when you do sign up for PrizePicks, and you will get your first deposit matched up to $100. PrizePicks, once again, they are a player prop-based DFS site, so it is very simple and easy to use. You're just taking more or less on a player's projection. They have some projections posted for Thursday night, but not a ton. I'm sure as we get closer to Thursday, they will add a lot more props available. There will be more props available once we get some updates on these injuries. And I will be sharing a couple plays that I like for this Thursday night game. I'll have a separate video going out on the channel probably sometime on Wednesday once more props get added to the board. So definitely check that video out if you're already playing on PrizePicks and you want to know some picks that I like for this game. But if you're not playing on PrizePicks, sign up, use code NOAH, and get your first deposit matched up to $100. But best of luck tonight, guys, or on Thursday night. Appreciate you guys watching the channel or watching the video, supporting the channel. Thanks as always for tuning into these Showdown videos. I hope they do help, and we will see you guys in the next one. Peace.